Hi, it's Alexis Hasselberger, time management and productivity coach. Now, today I want to talk about something that might be just like flying under your radar. I know that, for me, these things were for a long time. And so I'm willing to bet maybe that is the case for you. What I want to talk about is defaults. Like, what are your defaults? And are those serving you or are they kind of sabotaging you? And what are some defaults that we can think about? Now, what am I talking about? What is a default? What are your defaults? What does that mean? A default is just like, what do you do by default, right? What is the path of least resistance for you? Humans, we are creatures of convenience, right? We will take the easiest path every time, right? And so if we have defaults, they are the easiest path, right? Another way we can think about it is just our habits, right? Or what are the things that we think about or that we actually do without thinking about them, right? That's kind of what our defaults are. And if we can change some of those, then we can be, going upwards and to the right in a way that is much less effortful for us, right? So when you think about habits, when you think about defaults, I mean, this stat is always crazy to me that we about 43% of the stuff we do every day is by habit, by default. And so if we think about those being good habits, good defaults for us, then great, things are going well. And if we think that maybe they're not serving us as well, things could be going downhill and in a way that we're not even realizing. So that's what I mean by sometimes this stuff just flies under the radar. Your defaults are the things that you're not thinking about by default, right? So I want to give you a couple of examples of this, just real world examples of defaults and why they matter so much. So one of the defaults, just out in the world, not personally, but out in the world, is about organ donation, right? So there are some countries where you have to opt in to be an organ donor, like the US. You have to opt in to be an organ donor. And then there are other countries where you have to opt out of being an organ donor. So by default, you're opted in, and of course, you don't have to be an organ donor, but you have to take an action to opt out of that, right? And what we find is that in countries where you have to opt in, there aren't as many organ donors. And in countries where you have to opt out, there are a whole lot more because we're so much more likely to just go with whatever the default is. Now, another example of this is auto enroll in your 401k. Now, a long time ago, nobody was auto enrolling. Everyone had to enroll for themselves in the 401k. You had to make a decision, take an action to do it. And then several years ago, companies started to auto enroll you. So, of course, you didn't have to contribute to the 401k, but you did have to opt out if you didn't want to. And what happened is that enrollment increased. Right? People started saving more for retirement. More people started saving because the default was to be opted in. Now, one more example of this is voter registration. In a lot of countries, when you turn of voting age, 18 or whatever the age is, you are automatically registered to vote, right? There's nothing you have to do to make it happen. And in other countries, like the US, you have to actually do something to register to vote, right? You have to actively do something. And what we find is that in countries where people are opted in by default to voting, to voter registration, more people vote. And in countries where you have to do something to get opted in to vote, right? To actually make an action to do that, and sometimes they make it really hard, that fewer people vote. So these are just a few of the ways that defaults show up in the world. But let's bring it back to time management and productivity because that's probably why you're here on this page. So, when we think about what our own personal defaults are, I can think of a whole bunch of them that actually make quite a big difference. And they're things that you can change so that you don't have to think so much about them. So, one of them is just calendar meeting length, right? What are the defaults? 30 minutes and 60 minutes. Why are these the defaults? Because every single calendar system on the planet is set up that way. Well, maybe not every single one, but most of them are, right? Google Calendar, Outlook, they're all 30 minutes, 60 minutes by default. And that's why we end up having 30-minute meetings and 60-minute meetings. But you can actually change those defaults so that you can have shorter meetings. It doesn't mean that you're never going to have a 60-minute meeting. It means you have to opt into that, right? You have to make a choice to make it longer. So in Google Calendar, if you go into your settings, the setting is called speedy meetings, and you can change it to, 25 minutes as the default, whatever it is that you want. You can change that default to be shorter, which means that you will have shorter meetings more often because that's the default, right? If you're in the Outlook world, the setting is called end meetings early, which is not as fun to say, but that is the setting in the calendar. It's called end meetings early. And you can go in and you can change the default so that every time you want to have a shorter meeting, you don't have to change it. You have to change it if you want to have a longer meeting. So that's one way you can change those defaults. Now, another way that we can change the defaults is actually having to do with our calendars. And this is those calendar notifications, right? Those helpful notifications to make sure you get to that meeting on time, right? Now, what are the defaults? They're typically like 10 to 15 minutes before the meeting. And let me ask you a question. Is that actually helpful for you? I know it isn't for me. I know that what happened to me before I changed the defaults on the calendar notifications is that I would get that 10-minute notification. I would think to myself, well, I have time to do one more thing. And then I would be late to the meeting anyways, because the 10-minute notification was far too far in the future. Now, I am a huge fan of the 2 to 5 minute notification, right? 2 minutes gives you just enough time to wrap up what you're doing without starting something new so that you will be on time for the meeting. And that's just something you can go into your calendar settings and you can change those defaults, and that will help you. Now, another thing that we can do is also around notifications. And this is just related to basically every single app that you have, right? Every app that's on your phone, everything that you download on your computer, like everything has notifications on by default. And we know why, right? It's because the makers of all of these apps want us to use their app more. The notifications are on, it's going to bring us in, etc. But we don't necessarily want that, right? I don't know about you, but I don't want to check Instagram every time somebody has liked a photo. Like that doesn't sound very good to me. And so you can change those defaults. To change those defaults, what you want to do is just whenever you download something new, immediately go in and turn off the notifications or set them to be, whatever is going to be useful for you in that case, right? I mean, you may still want to have text notifications or something like that on, but probably don't need them for the new game you just downloaded. So you can change those notification defaults. But it's something you have to do. You have to do once for each app so that you will not be defaulted into those in the future. Now, what about something that's not with our technology? What about just our default to what do we say when somebody asks us something, right? So many of us default to yes, right? We could ask something, somebody wants to do something, us to do something, somebody needs our help, somebody wants us to volunteer for something. We say yes. We say yes by default because we want to be nice people, right? We want people to like us. I mean, as women, you may or may not be a woman or identify as women, but I know that women, especially in the US and in many places, are socialized to say yes, to be kind, to be nice, right? To be helpful, to be caring, all of these things. And all of those things are, that's fine. But it also wreaks havoc on your time if you default to yes, because you end up saying yes to a whole lot of things you regret saying yes to later. If you've ever heard of the yes damn effect, it is so aptly named. The yes damn effect is essentially when you say yes to something, and then when that thing comes up, you think, oh, damn, I don't want to be doing this, right? What if you changed your default from yes that you say without thinking, to you not even know, you don't even have to say no, just change it to let me think about it, right? Let me get back to you. Let me check my calendar, right? You can have a phrase that you say that is still accommodating and open, but is not yes. Because so often we say yes before we even have time to think about it, right? And you may very well say yes to a lot of these requests. That may make sense. But if your default isn't yes, if your default can become, let me think about it, let me check, let me get back to you, it gives you just enough time to actually make a decision about whether that is a way that you want to spend your time or not. So you can change that default from yes to let me think about it. And I bet that your future self will really appreciate what you have done. Now, I want you to tell me, I've shared a few different defaults that you could change. Do you have any defaults that you've set for yourself or defaults that after watching this, you're now thinking about that you have changed for the better to put you in a better position in terms of your time and your stress, et cetera? I want to hear about it. So drop a comment, please. And if you liked this video, give it a like. Let me know. Let me know it's worth it for me to keep creating content like this. And if you want to see this in your feed every single week, then make sure to subscribe. See you next time.
Hey, video editor here. I just want to pipe in to tell you that only about 24% of the people that watch our videos are actually subscribed. So it'd be a big help to the channel if you were to subscribe if you already watched these videos.